Okay, I think we're ready. Okay, something is still going on. Okay, so any questions or remarks? From the previous class? Yeah, of course. You take the microphone if you want to ask.
Bhante, could you explain a little bit more detail regarding to Yoniso Manasikara, regarding to wholesome and unwholesome qualities? In a sense, my question is here is that if there's a reflection, investigation, and wholesome and wholesome, if we don't even know, or we have wrong view about the wholesome quality or unwholesome quality, and it's so subtle, what I'm trying to ask is, when we're doing Yoniso Manasikara, are we investigating? Do we trying to understand our subtle mind activities?
To understand the subtle mental activities?
Yes, within ourselves, in relate to wholesome and unwholesome qualities.
Yeah, I would say Yoniso Manasikara has a very broad meaning and can apply at many different levels. So at the coarser level, you could say it's reflection, investigation on different types of action, and considering like what would be the consequences of this action. Yeah, I was wondering whether I had collected some passages that I think I did. Did you see it? I think I collected some passages that I thought illustrated Yoniso Manasikara. So one was from the Buddha's advice to his son Rahula. So this is considering when you're about to perform any action, whether by body, by speech, or even by thought, consider whether this action is going to lead to the harm or well-being of myself and others, whether it's going to lead to the harm or well-being of myself, the harm and well-being of others, or the harm and well-being of both. Then if you see that that action is going to lead to harm, then you abstain from it. If you see that it doesn't create any harm but leads to benefit, then you can perform that action. So this is Yoniso Manasikara being applied to distinguish between types of action. What kind of actions are wholesome, what kind of actions are unwholesome. And then one determines this by considering what are the likely consequences of that action for oneself or for others. Perhaps another way to reflect on actions, instead of taking into account the consequences, take into account or try to examine what are one's motivations for engaging in that action. Is the action motivated by something like greed or by desire for, well, this is a form of greed, desire for praise, honor, fame? Is it motivated by anger, hatred, resentment? Is it motivated by jealousy, envy, miserliness? I'm just trying to think of a list of different motivations. Stupidity, delusion, or is it motivated by good qualities, kindness, generosity, helpfulness to others? So you can consider your motivations before acting. Okay, so this is Yoniso Manasikara at the level of, let's say it, conduct or behavior. Then we could say Yoniso, going at a deeper level, Yoniso Manasikara investigates states of mind. In fact, here I would say yoniso manasikara comes very close to what is called, in the 7 factors of enlightenment, what's called Dhamma vichaya, that is, investigation of mental qualities. That is, one determines, are these mental states wholesome or unwholesome? And if one sees that they're unwholesome, then one eliminates them. If one sees that they're wholesome, then one strengthens them. In fact, I think the last time I collected some passages, or I pointed out some passages that occur in the suttas which show how ayoniso manasikara, that's careless attention, becomes the strong condition for the arising of the 5 hindrances, and then yoniso manasikara becomes one of the strong factors for overcoming the 5 hindrances. At least some of them are mentioned. Okay, so this is yoniso manasikara applied to the level of, we call this mental purification. Then there's a 3rd level of yoniso manasikara, and this is emphasized in the way the commentaries define yoniso manasikara, and that is examining things by way of being impermanent, dukkha, and non-self. And so this is yoniso manasikara. At this point, yoniso manasikara is sort of blending into panya, or wisdom. So maybe, I think the way I explained it last time, the way I understand it, is that yoniso manasikara is, we say, the preparatory stage for the arising of panya. So in yoniso manasikara, one is reflecting and examining things to see whether they're impermanent, dukkha, non-self. And then when panya arises, then one is actually having the experiential insight into impermanent, dukkha, non-self.
Is there a distinction between what we're talking about now and the padana concept of the 4 right efforts?
The 4 right efforts? Well, you see, when we discuss these qualities, to get some idea of what they are, we sort of have to separate them and then say, okay, this is yoniso manasikara, this is panya, or wisdom, this is right effort, this is right mindfulness. But in actual experience, they're sort of all blended together, like, the spices that are used to prepare a soup. And so what I would say, within this process, what gives the energy is, let me put it this way, energy is what empowers this process of right reflection or right examination. So this is right effort, is sort of that energy, a factor applied. And then when one is investigating the mental qualities, taking the mental qualities. So when one sees that these qualities are unwholesome, then one applies the effort to overcome them, to eliminate them. That is the right effort. And when one sees other qualities are wholesome, then one applies energy to strengthen and develop further those qualities. Again, that's the right effort. So I'd say within this process, yoniso manasikara, it's the aspect of reflection, examination, making the distinctions. And then energy, or right effort, is what steps in when those distinctions are made, to know what to eliminate, what to preserve and strengthen. Yeah, take the microphone.
If I remember correctly, you are saying manasikara is in the mind, and sikara is activities. So
Kara is action.
Yeah, action, activities.
Yeah.
So I might think, and you say manasikara has, in Abhidhamma, has a turning the opposite, turning the mind. So if one to investigate and study,
Yeah.
the subtle mind, the mind of the quality of our mind.
Yeah.
Even
bring the microphone a little lower.
even as a person, if we are doing unisom manasikara, we even had to investigate and challenging ourselves whether my wholesome idea, if it's wholesome or is biased.
Or what?
Or is biased.
I see. That's good. Yeah.
Is that that means almost you are turning into yourself. You are challenging yourself.
Oh yes.
Whether my value or my ideas or my thinking, is that correct or is that wholesome?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Definitely. That's an aspect of yoniso manasikara.
Yeah, I thought that is the fundamental effort. That's the most courageous. Is almost you're challenging yourself, the self.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, that's very good. Yeah. Please, what is your name? Ken. Ken, okay.
Bhante, today you mentioned the traditional belief that there'll be the disappearance of the Buddha Dhamma over the 5,000-year period.
Yeah.
And I just quite wondering if there's any basis in the Suttas for this pessimism regarding the long-term perpetuation of the Buddha Dhamma?
Wait, whether there's any...
Is there any basis in the Suttas
Yeah.
for this pessimism regarding the
I see.
long-term
For that. In the suttas, I don't think that a time period is specified for the disappearance of the Dhamma. I don't know where that number comes from. Okay, I'm going to step on thin ice here. Please, Dina, don't get up and leave. Okay, there's a passage. I think it comes in the Anguttara Nikaya also, in the Book of Eights, it comes in the Vinaya. This is the passage where the Buddha, first the Buddha's foster mother and aunt, Mahapajapati Gautami, appeals to the Buddha to allow women to go forth under the Buddha, to become, in other words, to create an order of nuns. And then several times the Buddha says, don't make that request, don't make that request, don't make that request. And then finally, Ananda comes to the assistance of Mahapajapati and uses some subtle means to sort of soften the Buddha's hard heart. So the Buddha finally consents, and he lays down certain conditions that women would have to follow if they become bhikkhunis. And then he makes Mahapajapati the first bhikkhuni. Okay, but then when this whole conversation is over, then the Buddha says, or he's quoted as saying, if women did not get permission to go forth, this pure holy life would have lasted a full 1,000 years. May I get the passage? Because my memory is getting bad with age. How cute. What is it? This is the sloth. But he looks happy. Yeah, I have it. I just have to get the particular passage at the end of the sutta. Oh yeah, here it is. If women had not obtained the going forth from household life to homelessness and the Dhamma and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata, the spiritual life would have been of long duration. The good Dhamma would have stood firm even for 1,000 years. I have to say this pains me too, because women have gone forth from the household life into homelessness. Now the spiritual life will not be of long duration. The good Dhamma will last only 500 years. Let me just see, there's a note here. Yeah, this is why, one of the reasons I question this pronouncement, or this passage. Like, if the passage were genuine, it seems to me, and the Buddha is concerned to preserve the long duration of the Dhamma, then it seems that the time for him to have issued that statement would have been before giving the ordination to Mahapajapati Gautami. Then he should say to Ananda, don't make that request. If women were to get ordained, then the duration of the pure Dhamma will be cut in half. And then Ananda would have dropped the request, and no order of bhikkhunis, and the Dhamma lasts 1,000 years. But now it comes after the ordination is given, so this makes it seem, I have to say, I don't like to say any portion of the canonical text is questionable, but I just have to raise these questions. And it seems to me it would have been not difficult for, particularly with the Anguttara Nikaya, because of the numerical arrangement, for somebody to, insert a passage into the sutta. You're shaking your head, but
Actually, I have different interpretation.
yeah, what is?
With the help of bhikkhuni,
Yeah,
we spread the Dhamma in half of the time. Instead of 1,000 years, we spread the Dhamma in 500 years.
I'm not sure I get your. Yeah. Yeah. I know, yeah.
Bhante, I want to apologize. I didn't mean to lead you down that path.
No, there's nothing to apologize for. I always... I didn't get his point. Yeah. It'll...
1,000 years without the help of Buddha.
I
Right,
see.
with men it would take
I see.
1,000 years, but if
So
you
now that
include
there's
women,
nuns,
it's
that they
only
will propagate
500.
it more widely.
It's a wonderful thing. That's what
That's
he
a
said.
good interpretation.
It's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Thank you, Johnny.
And then if it says that the Dhamma will last 500 years, then... Well, 500 years, and now we're about 2,500 years. But then don't forget that the commentator, or at least Buddhaghosa, is writing 800 years after the Buddha, so he's faced with the problem, if the Dhamma is to last 500 years, then what are we doing here in the Mahavihara in Anuradhapura? We should not have any Buddhism left. So the way this is where why I brought this in. This is where the commentary comes in on this passage and says that actually the Dhamma is going to last 5,000 years, but it's going to disappear in stages. And so it's in the first 500 years, that is the period of the flourishing of the Dhamma, when it's relatively easy to reach arahatship together with the analytical knowledges and the super knowledges, the superpowers. But after that 500-year period, then attainments become rarer, and we have the emphasis on scriptural study. Then even that declines till there's just the outer form of the Dhamma.
Bhante, I've heard Buddha having said that that when Dhamma disappears, the suttas respect to Nibbana first disappears.
The suttas which...
With respect to Nibbana.
Oh, I think I know what you...
Is this actually from suttas or commentary?
I think what you have in mind is another passage which speaks about the causes for the decline and disappearance of the Dhamma. And one of them is supposed to be when the monks don't want to listen to those discourses proclaimed by the Tathagata that are profound, deep. It says, connected with emptiness, sunyata pati sangyuta. Let me see if I could find that. Was I saying bad things about computer technology this morning? Okay. Well, this is in a different context, but it's speaking about these. Let me just see if I can get. This isn't the exact one. Let me get. This is speaking about dangers in the future. And it says, when those discourses spoken by the Tathagata are being recited that are deep, deep in meaning, world-transcending, connected with emptiness, they, that is the bhikkhus in the future, will not want to listen to them and so forth, try to understand them, and they won't think that these teachings should be studied and learned. But when other discourses, which are mere poetry composed by poets, beautiful in words and phrases, created by outsiders, spoken by their disciples, us recited, they will want to listen to them. Maybe is that the passage that you're thinking of?
Similar, this same thing, Bhante, yeah, that's what I was wondering. So has Buddha actually said that
this is the canonical text.
Suttas related to Nibbana and emptiness, they start disappearing first?
I don't recall that they disappear first, but it's rather one of the factors. It's in another sutta which speaks about the causes for the decline and disappearance of the Dhamma, is that when the monks don't want to listen to those discourses.
I see. Which sutta is that, Bhante? You remember? It's okay. It's okay.
It's someplace in the Anguttara Nikaya. There might be the same passage also in the Samyutta Nikaya. One just has to look in the index. I don't want to start searching for it now.
Thank you.
Bhante, in sentences such as what has not been stated and uttered by the Tathagata, why is the Tathagata used?
Why is what?
Tathagata used instead of the Buddha.
Because when the Buddha refers to himself, he always uses, or generally almost always uses, the word Tathagata in so many passages.
This is the passage spoken by the Buddha.
Excuse me?
So this is the passage spoken by the Buddha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Like very seldom does he say I, and he almost never refers to himself as Buddha. And other people, when devotees refer to the Buddha, they call him Bhagava, the Blessed One. And when outsiders refer to him, they call him either Samana Gautama or Bhavan Gautama. How Buddha became the defining quality, it's a little bit of a puzzle.
I kind of follow, but they kind of follow her question. If this is the Buddha's word, then how do we view the Mahayana Sutras, which mostly are not spoken by the Tathagata?
Yeah. I mean, certainly looking at them, from a historical point of view, the point of view of historical scholarship, one would have to say that they that they arose as formulated documents over a later period. And they themselves contain internal evidence that they arose during a period when writing was used to record sacred texts. Because in the Pali Suttas and their counterparts from other lineages, one never finds any reference to writing the text. But it's always, learning the text by recitation and preserving them by memory. But if you look at the Mahayana Sutras, they speak about the merits of copying the suttas. And so that shows that they arose during a period when writing was the preferred means of preserving the text. So we'd have to say that they come as literary documents from a later period. But as I said in the morning, what seems to me to be missing within the Pali Sutta collection is any discussion about a bodhisattva path. And yet it seems, in fact, even the Buddha doesn't speak about himself as having followed over many aeons a bodhisattva path. That appears only in texts from a later, in the Pali tradition, texts from a somewhat later literary strata, texts like the Buddha Vangsa, that I mentioned this morning, the Buddha Vangsa, Charya Pitaka, and the Jataka collection. And yet it seems to me that there must have been some people who requested the Buddha to explain the path that he himself took over many aeons. And so this would lead to what I would call the nuclear idea of a bodhisattva path. And perhaps that is what evolved into the Mahayana Sutras. Yeah, that's just the way I would understand it. And what's interesting about the Mahayana Sutras that we have, what are taken to be the earliest Mahayana Sutras, something like the 8,000-line Prajnaparamita, the Astasahasrika Prajnaparamita, already in those suttas one sees a pretty well-developed and consistent conception of the bodhisattva path. Like there is constant mention of 6 paramitas, which are usually followed by the 4 sublime states, and then the 37, taking from the early Buddhism, the 37 aids to enlightenment, the Bodhipakkhya Dhammas. So it seems that there must have been a period in which the bodhisattva concept, this I would call either stage 1 of the Mahayana, or maybe the pre-Mahayana landscape, a stage where the bodhisattva idea was gradually being elaborated and the basic lineaments or outlines of the bodhisattva path were being sketched. And yet we don't have literary documents which preserve events taking place during that period, but just the first Mahayana sutras that we have already show a well-developed concept of the bodhisattva ideal. And of course, even those sutras the Mahayana sutras go through a number of stages of development, from the earliest level, which is a layer which is considered to be like the Prajnaparamita sutras. Then there comes another layer, like the Lankavatara Sutra, which is moving in the direction of the mind-only school. And then still later sutras which show strong, like tantric elements, which then evolve into the tantric literature. Yeah. That's a short history of Buddha.
What?
That was a short literary history of Buddhism.
I'm just about to ask you the same thing for the ones that, for the sutras or the Nikayas that we're studying now.
Yeah.
I'm probably the only person in the room that doesn't know this, but can you give me an overview of how what were the first Nikayas? How did they, do you know what I'm asking? Like
Yeah.
the Majjhima Nikaya, now the Jataka, how did they fall in context? What were the first? What's the point? Are these
Okay.
like the books of the Bible where you get the Exodus, Genesis, blah, 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 like that? Or how does it?
Yeah,
know?
I wouldn't say like the books of the Bible, because at least the early books of the Bible are supposed to be like a historical account of the Jewish people, or the descendants of Abraham. Well, actually going back to creation, the creation of the world, the early stages and the history of the world, then coming to Abraham and Sarah, and then their offspring, and then the history of the Jewish people up to the time that they settle in what's now Israel. As far as the Nikayas go, it seems that in the earliest period, when the Buddha himself was alive, there was no such thing as Nikayas, but they were just texts which had conformed to certain typology of texts. One is called Suttas, which are probably taken to be the prose discourses. Then there's Gathas, which are works in verse. Something called Gaya, works in mixed prose and verse. Then a number, Vyakarana, which probably are answers to questions. So it seems that the division into 4 Nikayas would have arisen after the Buddha passed away. And when we compare, we have 4 Nikayas in Pali, and then in Chinese there are translations of works corresponding to the Nikayas from other Buddha schools. And so it seems that a division of the text according to the scheme of 4 broad categories was used by the different Buddha schools, though we don't have any knowledge of when this 4-fold scheme arose. But the different schools, you see, the problem with the text preserved in Chinese is that each of the 4 agamas in Chinese comes from a different school. So the Digha Dirghagama, the counterpart of the Digha Nikaya, comes from a school called the Dhamma Guptakas, which flourished in the northwest, what's now Pakistan. The Majjhima Agama, which is the counterpart of the Majjhima Nikaya, I think this was Sarvastivadin. The Sangyukta Agama, which is the counterpart of the Sangyukta Nikaya, maybe Mula Sarvastivada. The Ekaka-nipāta Agama, which is the counterpart of the Anguttara Nikaya, comes from still another school. So we can't, compare. Yeah, we don't have an exact counterpart of the 4 Nikayas from one other school so that we could compare them. But what we can see from the 4 agamas is that different schools classify text in different ways. So a sutta that is in the Pali Majjhima Nikaya might, in the Chinese agamas, might turn out to be in the Ekaka agama. In fact, I might. Yeah, this was a table which shows correspondences between the Pali versions and the parallels in the Chinese, also Tibetan, Sanskrit fragments. Would you see more interesting differences with the Majjhima Nikaya? Okay, so you see this is the Sabhasava Sutta, which is Sutta number 2 in the Majjhima Nikaya. In the Chinese collection, it comes in the counterpart of the Majjhima Nikaya, the Majjhima Agama, but it also occurs in the Ekaka Agama, which is the counterpart of the Anguttara Nikaya. This sutta, number 4, Bhaya Bhairava Sutta, apparently it doesn't occur in the Chinese Majjhima Agama, but in Chinese it occurs in the counterpart of the Anguttara Nikaya. This sutta, the Vatupama Sutta, occurs in the Majjhima Agama, because that is from one school, but another school, the school that gave us the Ekaka Agama, has it in the counterpart of the Anguttara Nikaya. Still another school has this sutta in the counterpart of the Samyutta Nikaya. Well, that's a pretty long answer to your question. But you see, just the basic point is that the different schools use the scheme of long discourses, middle discourses, thematically connected discourses, and numerical discourses. But it's just that when it came to individual suttas, sometimes one school would put it in one collection, another school put it in another collection. Because, for example, many suttas in the Majjhima Nikaya, as we've seen, are built up out of a numerical outline. And since the Buddha might say, there are 5 of these or 6 of these, and then speak a middle-length discourse that goes in the Pali collectors, put it in the Majjhima Nikaya. But another school might have said, well, these are suttas based on 6 items. We put it in our Anguttara Nikaya.
Thank you so much.
Okay, it's been quite a full day. Okay, so we could end with the 3 half bows. We could stand up.